continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded.
Strike that. Reverse it, Barack. Don't you meet in the White House over 100 times with Black Lives Matter who chant, "What do we want, dead cops? When do we want them now?" They want the guns taken away from the police because they're going around killing black men. That's what their job is, to kill black men. So if you take the guns away from them, then the guns go to the government. And if you take the guns away from the people, then the guns go to the government. And what happens there with your civilian security force that is just as powerful, just as strong, just as trained, and just as well funded as the military? Why, militarized police force watching us with big guns. Yeah, that's a lot better. A very scary thing is humans that react to fear and what they're capable of under pressure and fear of death. I go back to the witch hunts because I believe this is what we're headed towards. Now, it's not going to be exactly witch hunts, though it might be if certain religions take over. There'll be witch hunts all over the world. And there will be a lot of women dead. But what I want to talk about today is the dangerous notion of a red flag law. How the witch hunts started. Now, there was a book you probably know. It's called The Hammer of the Witches, and it was written in Denmark by a monk called Heinrich Kremler. It was sanctioned by the Pope. Apparently, as long as the Pope puts a note in front of the book, he okays it. The Pope did such things, and at the same time, the Pope didn't always read, but he put his seal on. The disgraced clergyman Heinrich Kremler uses his Latin name. Lord Pope Innocent Herenicus Institutorius wrote this book here, Malleus Maleficarum. What is it about? Oh, it's about the devil, how the devil is bad, and demons are bad, and women being witches are bad. The devil is bad, that's good, that's good. Put my stamp, devil is bad, very good. Hey Goomba, hey, you got any pasta fazool left? In Denmark, it began a craze of executing witches for all sorts of things. And how it propagated was little things like if your maid goes out at night and the master is sexually attracted to the maid, and she comes back in the morning, you can punish her by accusing her of being a witch. She may be having a sexual liaison with probably the stable boy, and he wants it with her. So, to begin how to find if someone is a witch, you have to look for the mark of the devil on them, because they've made a covenant with the devil. It isn't that they've done anything wrong yet, or any spell. They were looking for people who made a covenant with the devil. Any mark will do. Birthmark, a pimple, anything at all. So they would strip the witch naked and shave her hair off, because most of the time these marks came under the hair where they couldn't be seen. And that is what David Seaton, the deputy bailiff, did to his housekeeper. And he finally found his mark after he gave her the thumb screws, which crushes your hands, and did the wrenching, which can crush your face and all the many bones of your face, fracture your skull. He found what most likely was a hickey. And in those days, it was a sin to have sex before marriage, a grave sin. So she rather admit that she was a witch than admit that she had sex. Admitting that she was a witch always leads to death. Sex, the church will forgive you. But at the time, these were Protestants. But the Malleus Maleficarum, which was written by this Danish Dominican monk, telling the world that yes, witches did exist. They walked the planet. They made covenants with the devil. And they would meet every night on the Sabbath, Friday night, the Jewish Sabbath, at night, naked in the woods. And each one of them would have sex with the devil. And witches in those days weren't beautiful. Witches in those days, anyone who was old, was lame, had warts, hair on their lips, wrinkles. They looked like witches, but it was because they were terribly poor and they couldn't wash. And most of these women were widowed or alone in some way. So they didn't have a man to stand up for them saying, no, my wife is not a witch. These women were all alone. And they were very poor. So what happened was King James VI of Scotland wed Anne of Denmark. And this is where he heard of the hammer of the witches. And there was a terrible storm which almost sunk the ship. And in turn, about 10 witches were hung for the deed in Denmark, accused of having caused that storm to kill the new king and queen. So when James got back to Scotland, he wrote a book called Demonology. And it's supposed to be fact-filled and logical. His intention was to prevent the false accusation of anyone accused of being a witch and to kill hysteria. Only persecute the person who's proven to be a witch. Well, in those times, James became Elizabeth I died without issue because she never got married. If she got married, she may have lost the throne. That's one of the reasons why she didn't get married. She died, and James, which was her cousin, became King James I of England. However, a civil war in England broke out, and judges were very scarce. So it came down to magistrates and lay people to take up the burden of fighting crime and bringing perpetrators to justice. And what better perpetrator than a witch? Because the witch has the power of the devil. She has the power to create storms and murders and all sorts of maladies without even touching the person. People were awfully afraid in those times. You see, this is what they were afraid of. Someone puts out a piece of propaganda, keeps repeating a lie, and we've seen this in recent years over and over again, a big lie. And then people get enraged and scared. And if you can keep perpetrating this, keep pushing this, you can have your way on many things. In her leaked speech to Wall Street, thank you, Julian Assange. I dream of a world without borders, in an uninformed and compliant citizenry. Somebody bring the Chardonnay fast. I'm feeling verklempt. An elderly woman named Elizabeth Clark. She had one leg. She was a widow. She was 80 years old. And she was accused of being a witch, having hexed someone's wife, they claim. Well, they went to her house and they stripped her naked and they looked at her genitals and they saw a sore there. Could definitely be the mark of the devil. They cut her hair and they kept her up. They kept her walking. They kept her moving without sleep until she lost her mind. And when these witches are pushed, or these women accused of being witches, people are pushed to the limit. They're afraid of being accused as a witch. And they want the torture to stop. They get to a point where you want to give the torturer what they want. That way they'll be nice to you, a little bit nicer. They'll let you go. The torture will stop. They'll kill you in the end. If you're accused of being a witch, then there's nothing but a death sentence. And the death sentences were horrible. Sometimes they will strangle you a little bit and knock you out before they burn you, or they put you on a short noose. So your neck, when the stool is pulled out from underneath you, you don't fall fast or far enough to break your neck and kill you instantly. You slowly strangle to death. So these poor people living horrible lives, probably never bathing, or rarely ever bathing. In their suffering, they suffered even more. Out of fear, people went into hysterics. Now, this was in England, and this was in Denmark, and it went across Europe. About 500 witches were killed in all. And there was a layperson at the age of 24 decided to take this up. So he would be a hero. He would be looked at as a god. Since there was essentially no police force, because the judges were very scarce at this time, he took it upon himself and designated himself as the Witchfinder General, 24 years old. And he was a master at torture. And the more convictions he got, you see, he was getting to a point where everyone he brought up was convicted. And sometimes you make a deal with someone who's been accused as a witch. You see, when these people are pushed and tortured, they want to make their torturer happy and to stop the torture. See, I've been good. I've been good. They give up names. They give up names of people who are completely innocent. But at this point, they've been driven insane, and they just want that little bit of relief. They want to give the torturer what he wants, so it all stops. So in turn, each person ratted out at least 8 to 10 other people. And under Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, about 300 witches were killed, and 500 in total over about 4 years' time. And witches were being killed all over Europe. This is not just under the Roman Catholic Church. All the Protestant churches, everyone thought it was the end times. And they went through all this. But see, in the Catholic Church, one little perk, they hold Jesus Christ up to you and they say, will you renounce Satan? And in Christianity, if you could be forgiven for your sins and not get punished. That was Jesus's whole thing. Just never do it again. Even if you did do it, never do it again. Renounce the devil and accept Jesus Christ. So there was that option. There was that option. And in Italy, there were women who did grow herbs, did heal people, and did bless people. They were called the Benedicaria. And not one of them was killed for being a witch, because they weren't witches. You say witches are the ones that healed people with the ointments. No, a strega is a dirty word in Italian. You're a bad witch. You convert with the devil. It isn't that people were healing and blessing. That was okay, because that was good. It was only the people that were doing ill that they were looking for, and had a pact with the devil and joined a coven every Friday night, taking in witch's flying ointment full of mugwort, thinking they're in a stupor, some kind of drug-like trance. So there were women that the Catholic Church recognized as healers, and women that could go bless and heal, because the Catholic Church had saints. The difference between Protestant and Catholic. They put the Blessed Mother as our mother, as the woman who gave birth to our God. So in the Catholic churches was a little bit different how they treated women, and women who went out and blessed and healed, because there was such a thing as saints. And that's what saints did. Malleus Maleficarum was a statement saying that, yes, demons walk this earth. The devil is walking this earth. End times are soon coming. And the devil is picking people to do his bidding. It wasn't necessarily to promote witch hunts, but it was to tell the people that this is what's going on. Now, James's book, Demonology, was supposed to be a rational approach that would prevent innocent people from being killed or tortured as witches, but definitely torture and kill people who have proven to be witches. So out of fear, people finally admitted that they were a witch when they weren't a witch, because they'd been tortured and sleep deprived, made to walk, made to run for days on end without sleep, beaten, tortured, thumbscrews, humiliated. They did this to men too. In fact, Vicar John Lowe, he was a vicar for 40 years, but people didn't like him. They didn't like him because he was mean and he said nasty things. He was just not a good personality for a shepherd to a flock. So they turned in, his own parish turned him in as a witch because he was mean. Now, a lot of these people were elderly people, and a lot of them are just cranky. And because you've got some beggars on the streets, and they're not attractive, and they're bothersome to you, you can accuse them as a witch. And so they did, to get rid of people that are unwanted, or people who would, the alms given to the church to give to the poor, the people who took those alms, who needed help, They didn't like that. Those people were draining the system, you see. So, though they had a system in place to take care of them, they got tired of taking care of them. And they accused them of being witches. It's not unusual that upper classes do this to lower classes. In England, if you were of the upper class, all the lower classes are white too. They're white, they're Christian, they've got the same genetics, but you were poor. And if you were poor, the police didn't care if you were killed. You were thrown down a hole called the Hole of Hell. And they had these holes of hells in mansions in England. It was a hole in the floor with a metal lid, and on the bottom there were spikes. You would just throw that unwanted poor person who was probably starving quite a bit onto these spikes to die slowly. You put the lid over it so it doesn't bother you, and you can go about your day without hearing the screams. And you usually landed on either other dying bodies or dead bodies. Pretty miserable. Or you were hung if you stole a piece of bread. Little crimes, any little crime, was punishable by death. After all, in the Old Testament, everything was punishable by death, wasn't it? A lie was punishable by death. And so stealing, even if it's a crumb, was punishable by death. So it wasn't singling out just the adulterers or the people who committed murder. Everything in the Old Testament was punishable by death. So it was okay. But then they got the idea to sell their underclass, the unwanted underclass, to the colonies for 5 shillings each. You could have this indentured servant, but they're really not an indentured servant. They're really your slave, because once you buy that servant, you never have to set them free. So I would say about 99% of them, because they were so poor, so malnourished, they didn't live long. They didn't live long enough to see freedom. Slaves from Africa were 50 silver coins. They were strong, they fed them well, they weren't malnourished. It was too much to lose an African slave, too costly. So if you get these slaves and you work them to death because you're only paying 5 silver coins for them, well, there's a bargain. Now we're coming down to red flag laws. But I could also couple that with you're a Trump supporter. Because it's happening to Trump supporters. Antifa. I started this channel as a warning about Antifa. And what's going to become of them? Because they don't know history. They don't know that they're Nazis. They don't know of the black shirts, of the brown shirts, the fate of these groups that did the same thing as Antifa, would silence dissenting voices against the regime, the fascistic regime. There was no freedom of speech, so they would go out at night and beat people up and kill them. And then there was the Red Army, Stalin's Red Army, Mao's Red Guard, who would go out and beat people up who wanted to hold on to the old ways and didn't want to accept communism. They were tortured until most of them actually committed suicide. And then there was a Khmer Rouge, killed anybody who admired the West. Pol Pot didn't like that. He got out of university in France and decided, I hate America, and then went on a killing spree. So it's usually the young. All these are the young, just like Antifa. But in the end, Mao, Hitler, all of them had to kill these people that were out of control torturing and killing other people. So they are beaten into submission, into fear, and accept the communist regime. Little does Antifa know who's paying them. Little do they know what their fate is. Because if they knew anything about history, they would know that they are the fascists. And they would know they were the brown shirts. And they do not know the night of the long knives, the night the brown shirts were massacred. We have a coming new witch hunt. Because if someone is an annoyance to you, or they're telling us don't fear these people from this country or that country or this religion or this ethnicity, except for the whites, of course, and the veterans. That's why the veterans are committing suicide 22 a day. Because they're on. Obama put them on the terrorist watch list. I remember when Janet Napolitano, Homeland Security Secretary, announced that veterans, the ones that did the will of President Obama, did their duty, went out there, came back insane because of the killing and the horror of war and the horror of ISIS. They know how to use a gun really well. They did the bidding of Obama. Maybe they're like Obama's brown shirts, but they didn't torture. They just went to do their duty. But because Obama put them on a terrorist watch list for being a veteran, what do you think happened to them? They looked at themselves and thought, just like those witches, those women accused of being as witches. They told all sorts of stories of things that they never did or never could do. They gave names of people that were completely innocent. Anything so death could come quickly. They wanted to die. They wanted to get out of there because there was no hope. There was no hope. And they were so brutalized and broken, they knew they couldn't survive. Most of them died in prison, waiting to be killed. So just like those innocent people accused of being witches, being told and tortured until you believe that you're evil, coming home from war after you did the duty of your commander-in-chief, then realizing what you did was wrong because that commander-in-chief doesn't think anything of your life. You are worthless, just like those masters and those wealthy people. Nobility looked at the poor people. They're just nuisances. They're in my way. This one is only good if they can give up more names as an excuse to exterminate more people. So these veterans are killing themselves. And that plague infected America, infected Salem. The whole witch craze came over here too. They heard about it. Now, it is suspected that it's ergot poisoning, which is a mold that forms on rye. And they didn't realize that. A little rain falls on it, doesn't dry up, you get enough cloudy days. And if you eat the bread, it can make you hallucinate. I think that it was ergot poisoning that caused that, because nobody could understand. But it was simple. We were getting shipments from England. They were coming over to the Americas to bring us things. And so the story of the witches and the trials and how to prove if someone is a witch the whole dunking thing, where if you drowned, you accepted the waters of baptism, so you died, you were innocent. If you floated, you were clearly a witch, because you rejected the waters of baptism. That's why they did the dunking thing. And if you dunk someone enough, you go crazy. They'll give up and say anything. So was it the ergot poisoning, or was it just the knowledge, the insanity that infected the Puritans over in England as well as over here? That this is the end times. The devil is walking the earth. Well, the devil was Matthew Hopkins, I say. That's who I think the devil was. And he walked he was only 24. He died at 27 of possible tuberculosis. He walked with a walking stick, had a big tall black hat, big black boots. He definitely looked like the devil. Certainly did. So what's going to happen if we get red flag laws? Laws, if you see this, because if you see someone torturing an animal, that's a sign. It is a sign. When they torture animals when they're children, Nicholas Cruz, he and his brother, their mother was in jail when she had Zachary. She was a drug addict, very hard drugs. His brain was being bathed in a bath of toxic chemicals, and so was his brother. His whole body, during the entire time he was in the womb. So your brain doesn't stop growing until the age of 26. So be careful what you put in your body that stays in your body, because it will affect your brain. And we don't need anybody in this country or the world to lower their IQs. We need to keep those IQs up. Otherwise, we will deteriorate back into the age of the barbarian. All of us. Not one group, but all of us. The government, they will give you a list. If you see these signs, these are red flags. And you look at the list, and maybe you've done one or two of those things, but it wasn't evil. I can imagine what is on that list, but sometimes we've done something, and then we get afraid. Is this me? And then you're watching yourself, and you're wondering. We know that under Patriot Act was one thing. When Jefferson, he said, if you give up a little liberty for a little more security, you get neither. It's all right. 9/11 beat us into submission. We'll accept the Patriot Act. Yes, listening to our phone calls is good. That way they can find the terrorists. Well, now the borders are open. What do you mean? Everybody's coming in. And they're coming in from across the sea through Panama and Costa Rica, through the station there. And they're brought to our border by drug mules, which they pay $40,000. So we said that was okay, but it seems like it doesn't matter anymore, does it? With the open border, it doesn't matter anymore. Everybody's coming in. The suspension of habeas corpus. You can get thrown in jail, not even be told what you're being charged with. No rights read and no lawyer. That's what happened under Obama. And an untold amount of drone strikes, even upon American citizens overseas. It's a drone strike, accidentally got hit, killed more innocent people than any other president with those drone strikes, by the way. So what was the Patriot Act for? Well, it was ramped up under Obama. That's right, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's okay that there's a camera here and there's a speaker, a microphone. They can hear everything I'm saying. I'm not doing anything wrong. I shouldn't have to worry. In fact, I'll be very happy knowing that they're watching me and seeing that I'm not doing anything wrong, so they'll know I'm a good soldier, just like what Facebook is doing in China. You get points on being a good citizen if you post the right things, if you like the right things. You have to be a good little communist. So we prove to our overlords, the ones that are watching us through the NSA, that we're good and we're okay with it, because we're proving to you that we've got nothing to hide. So even in the privacy of our homes, we're being watched. And to be good little soldiers, you must, you see something that could be a red flag, but you're not sure. Or there's your neighbor that wronged you. They could have taken something from you. They could have called you some names. Or you just don't like them because they've got a nicer car, or gee, they're 60 years old and they look like they're 30. Something you don't like about them. You can get back at them very easily and say, oh, I know they own a gun. The witch hunt will start. And then they're patted on the head, like a communist leader will pat his little comrades on the head for telling on your neighbor. Do you know that that's a communist thing? They didn't have the microphones and the cameras like we've said yes to it. Yes, a phone with a camera? I don't have to buy a camera. I mean, I got it in my phone. That's just amazing. Wow, a 2-in-1, and it's kind of cheap. So everybody got on board for that one. Now, there's eyes everywhere. Communist Russia would have absolutely loved how Obama amped up the NSA this way. And we accepted it. But in communism, your eyes are open to tell on your neighbor so they can come and seemingly for no reason at all, no evidence, no witnesses. You're sent to the gulag. You're sent to Siberia to starve to death and get beaten. Families never saw members of their families ever again because they were just taken up and brought to the gulag. Without trial, without attorney. But that's communism. To tell on your neighbor, to rat your neighbor out anytime you see anything. Whereas a family member still might want to do that because there are abusive members in every family. Well, in many families, there are abusive people. And they might want to get back at their child, put them in their place. Or their parent, put them in their place. Or a brother or a sister who's done something to you that may have been very bad. You can go and say, oh, I saw them torturing animals. And they're dressing up like ISIS, trying to scare people. You could say all sorts of things that have no proof at all. You not necessarily will find that dead animal or that ISIS outfit or whatever else they did or they said. And people become paranoid of everything that everyone says. Should I tell? Should I tell? Oh, is that? Oh, if I don't tell, it will be my fault because the government will know, because they know that that person is doing this because they're watching everyone. And then they'll know that I saw it and I didn't tell. Oh, I better tell. I'm not sure. Is that wrong what they're doing? I don't know. But I better tell. I better tell because there's cameras everywhere and microphones. I better tell. I really better tell because they'll know. See how quickly such a thing? That's how communism works. And then you tell. And they may be completely innocent. They've never used the gun in any weird way. But you're so paranoid that you're looking at something that might be, that the dear leader might disapprove of. So you have to tell. You have to tell authorities because it looks a little askew. Or they got angry at something. People get angry on guns, but don't bring the gun out. I get angry. I see people getting angry all the time. Nobody's using a gun or a knife. But the fear of someone getting angry. But isn't it 40 times more? You're 40 times more likely to be killed by a knife than a gun. Every year, there are quadruple the amount of knife murders than there is people getting murdered by guns. Well, but guns shoot faster. See, guns are designed to kill, and they shoot faster. So we got to take the guns away from the people. But there are more killings by knife. So if guns shoot faster, then why are there more killings by knives? Why don't they just all use guns? Because you can get guns illegally. You take the guns away, you make people seize the guns. Guns come in through our borders all the time. We will always have guns because they'll be coming through all the time, illegally. So there's really no way to take all the guns away. Oh, and there's such a thing as bombs and pressure cooker bombs. Yes, no, I'm going to be making rice tonight, but I need to buy a bunch of nails and sharp pieces of metal. Yes, it's just going to be a little decoration, a little modern art I'm going to do. The largest school massacre in history occurred in Bath, Michigan, at the turn of the century. It was the man who was on the school board. He had animals, who he had tortured, by the way. He was a red flag. He set up explosives in the school and tanks of kerosene in the basement, ready to go off should the dynamite not go off in the schoolhouse. But it did go off. And he came down after he killed his wife and killed his animals, the animals that he had been torturing. He came down and his truck was still full of shrapnel and nails and all sorts of things. It was a bomb, essentially. He took his shotgun and shot at the truck. So the gun wasn't used on people, but he could have triggered that explosion without the gun. And it blew up. It killed him and 3 other people. That was the largest. I think it was 42 that was killed in United States history. And if you look up on the web, I believe it's Russia that has the biggest school massacre in history. We're different places on the list, but far, far from number 1. Happens all over the world. When you read that, well, I want to see if I can find that list, see if they scrubbed that one from the web. At that time it was over 350. And they were all over the world. And they weren't all guns. A lot of them were bombs, fire, all different ways of killing people en masse. So wake up, wake up. Take away the guns. There'll be illegal guns, so that's not going to end the shootings if you take away our guns from the innocent people. You'll have people losing their minds in fear because they'll watch each other just like they did in Soviet bloc countries. Everyone watched each other and was ready to tell on them because of the pat on the back. You're a good communist. You told on your neighbor. Yes. But they're still watching you, and they'll kill you in a heartbeat. But you think that if you tell, you think that's going to save your life. Or you're going to get something special. It's all about surviving day after day, maybe a little more food because they're bread lines. Bread lines means, Bernie Sanders, they're food rations because they don't grow enough food for everyone. They don't make enough. They do it on purpose to cull the population. You kill off the weak and the sickly and the elderly. Then you have a strong population if you need to go to war. You see, bread lines are bad, Bernie. So you tell. The eye is upon you, watching you, seeing everything you are and everything you will never be. George Orwell.